Right guys, in this video what we're going to be looking at is how the government can attempt to fix different market failures. Now on the board what you've got here is a summary of the market failures that you need to be thinking about. We've looked at positive and negative externalities. Okay, what we should know is that negative externalities are overconsumed, they're overproduced because people fail to consider those external costs. Positive externalities tend to be underconsumed and underproduced because people fail to see the benefits of those wonderful external benefits that are created. So when you think about what the government has to do, they've got to make sure that negative externalities are produced and consumed in smaller quantities to get back to the optimal output point. Positive externality wants to raise production and consumption to create more wonderful external benefits. In a free market economy, if we were looking at a pure public good that's both non-rival and non-excludable, you're going to get the free rider problem, which could lead to these things not existing at all. So the government have got to make sure these things exist in the economy as well, so correct that missing market problem. And then the final one is linked to information failures, the idea of asymmetric or imperfect information. It's about trying to make sure that buyers and sellers can be rational in markets, so giving them full access to information in markets. So all the interventions we're going to be looking at focus on trying to solve these three different problems. Okay, now I'm just going to load up a blank document here. Let's now think about the different intervention strategies available to the government. Okay, now let's think about the first one, sales taxes. And this is no different to an indirect tax. Okay, now think about what indirect tax will do. Imagine we're in a market where we have this equilibrium point. So demand is equal to supply. But if we were to impose an indirect tax on this business, then supply will shift inwards because we're in effect raising the cost of production. And what this will do, it will lower demand and the market will get smaller. Remember, this distance here is the tax per unit. And what we could do, we can work out the tax revenue because this is the tax per unit. These are the sales. And this will give us the tax revenue generated for the government. Now, you would put taxes on things that we would regard as bad. So we're looking here mainly at negative externalities and we're looking at demerit goods. Things that we want to lower consumption of. Okay, so to correct that welfare loss, if you like. Now, with these taxes then, think about what we're trying to do. We're trying to internalise the externalities. So what the government would have to do is to shadow price the external costs. In other words, work out how much we're over-consuming negative externalities and put the right tax in place to fix that particular problem. If that happens, it means that the market is paying for the external costs, and it means the people that have been affected in a bad way are now being compensated for what happens. Okay, so sales taxes are designed to lower production and consumption of something, in order to correct things like negative externalities. Now on that theme, we can also bring in place pollution permits. Now pollution permits are tradable. Okay, now think about the problem. Most assets in an economy are owned by private individuals. Okay, so my back garden I own, I'm responsible for. If somebody wants to use it, they've got to pay me to use it. I own me, I own my own labour. If people want to use my labour, again, they've got to pay for it. Trouble is, we have in the economy lots of common resources. And these resources are technically not owned by anybody. And I'm thinking here about the air supply, the rivers, the streams, for example, to a certain extent public land, the seas, lakes, for example, all these things are common resources. Now the biggest one is the air supply. Okay, now the air supply obviously is essential for survival, but every year we all contribute pollution into the atmosphere, which can create lots and lots of external costs. So if we want to correct these negative externalities, we've got to somehow reduce how much pollution is chucked up into the atmosphere every single year. Think about it at the moment. If you chuck pollution up into the atmosphere in a free market economy, there's no cost for the business at all. In fact, it probably saves them money not having to dispose of things properly. So what the government will do, they will say, right, we will take ownership of the air supply, it's ours. And the government will work out an optimal output. We're not saying businesses shouldn't be allowed to pollute at all. It's inevitable they're going to have to. But we work out what is a fair amount of pollution. And we say that is the maximum pollution that certain industries are allowed to do. So work out the optimal output for a different industry or market. We then say to the firms in that market, if you want to pollute, you've got to buy permits. And the government will sell, or supply if you like, a certain amount of permits. And then different businesses will bid for the right to buy these different permits. So in effect, what we're doing, we're creating a market where there'll be a supply of permits and a demand for permits. That'll mean when demand's high, the price of permits are high. When demand is low, there'll be a low price of permits. Okay, now think about what this should then do. It should incentivize firms to cut back on pollution. Because the more they cut back on pollution, the more they invest in, let's say, clean or renewable technology, for example, the less permits they've got to buy next time round as well. These permits are also tradable, which ultimately means that if they don't need all their permits, they can sell them on to other firms in the market as well. Now think about what this should do. It will raise the cost of production for firms, which again will raise prices, okay, which means that we should all demand a little bit less, which should ultimately cut how much pollution is created. But now, the two different types of intervention that I've focused on so far have been designed to cut back on negative externalities. Subsidies are designed to promote positive externalities and merit goods. Okay, so what we do with subsidies, we do the exact opposite of a tax. So if that's the market equilibrium point, remember merit goods and positive externalities, we want people to consume more of them. We want firms to produce more of them. So we give firms a big fat subsidy. And what this will do, it will force down market price, so we all buy more. And of course that is the subsidy per unit. Okay, and the overall cost to the firms will be, well, that's how many have been supplied. That's the subsidy per unit. Go back to the axis, and we get that subsidy cost. And of course, subsidies will make things cheaper to encourage more people to demand positive externalities. Okay, so that could be put on things like public transport, for example, whereas taxes could be put on, let's say, cars or aeroplane travel. The next one is state production. Okay, and all state production is, it's designed to ensure public goods exist, but we also have state production of merit goods and things that create positive externalities. Okay, so good examples could in Britain be, you know, that the government will provide things like flood defences out of people's general taxation. They will provide other things which you could argue are aspects of public goods, such as police services that protect people. But we also provide lots of merit goods or positive externalities out of our taxes, such as the NHS or healthcare, the fire services, for example. And then we also have state production of things like gyms. Now the difference with gyms is with most of these things I've talked about, the government will take taxes and provide them out of that taxes. Some things they will expect us to pay for. Okay, so that could be things like gyms, but they would offer them at maybe a lower price than what the free market would do. We also have state production of things like council houses, so state ownership of houses to make sure that we can all access these things. The state will provide lots of infrastructure like roads as well across the economy. Because again, roads, you could argue, have got some aspects of a public good, which means they can't really charge for them in the free market. So state production, a big type of intervention. Now moving on, we can then use maximum prices and minimum prices. Now a maximum price is designed to make things more expensive. Okay, so in a free market economy, people would pay P1 and the market would clear at Q1. A maximum price is where we set the price above the equilibrium minimum. I beg your pardon, I've got this the wrong way around. This would be a minimum price. Sorry about that confusion. So a minimum price is where we set the price above the equilibrium. Okay, so we have this. So in the free market economy, we'd operate at P1, Q1. The minimum price will be set above the equilibrium point. And what we're trying to do here is to raise the price. And again, you will be sticking these things on negative externalities and demerit goods. So, for example, there's rumours that people would like to see the introduction of minimum prices on alcohol to raise the price even higher, so less people will buy it. We have the carry bag charge, minimum 5p, which should lower demand for these products. We can then have maximum prices, and these are the exact opposite. So a maximum price is designed to make things cheaper. So market would clear at P1, Q1. A maximum price is where we set the price below the equilibrium point. We say to firms you cannot charge above this particular level here. So these will be on good things, things that we regard as good for people. It could be to make things like gym memberships more affordable for people. It could be to make public transport affordable for more people. Okay, now normally what we would do alongside this is to use subsidies, just to make sure the market can clear at that new lower price level. Right, moving on. Next one is regulation. We can regulate markets. It's basically about imposing rules on buyers and consumers. And these can exist in all sorts of different markets and market failures. So things that create negative externalities or demerit goods, we can have rules. So with smoking, for example, smoking is banned in public places. Cigarette companies are allowed to advertise on TV. They're now expected to display warning signs of the dangers of the contents of their products. And the idea will be it should hopefully lower demand for those things. We also have regulation on things like positive externalities and merit goods. So we have standards imposed on education, age requirements you must attend until you're 18, for example, to force consumption of it. So regulation's about trying to change what happens in a marketplace. It's either trying to make people demand more of something or demand less of something, depending on what they're trying to achieve. And the last one is about providing information. Okay, so for example, the government are always running health campaigns on TV, making people aware of the importance of cutting back on eating processed meats or eating too much fats or sugars, for example. The idea would be if you give people more information, they can make more rational choices. We can also use regulation here where we enforce firms to supply more information to customers. Okay, so what you've got there, guys, are all the different types of government intervention.